Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, which has unveiled its own reforms days after the Building Bridges Initiative recommended its overhaul before the 2022 polls. I'm now joined by former IEBC CEO Ezra Chiloba. Many thanks for your time. Let's begin with the public spat between Chebukati and Raila that we saw the other day on how much a referendum would cost. Already, IEBC becoming very vocal on its position in this election year, in the electioneering period. What is your thought on that public spat?
Thank you very much, Michelle. Well, it's not a new discussion. When we go back to history, you'll find that the cost of election has always been a major issue for this country. And the desire has always been that as much as possible, we need to reduce the cost of elections, which I agree that all of us have to find ways or cheaper ways or means to be able to reduce the cost of elections. But then you also have to ask yourself, what are the drivers of the cost of elections in this country? So there's a contradiction, or what we call a paradox, whereby what you want as ingredients towards free and fair and credible election, which also basically is what is going to determine the cost of election. And you go back and ask yourself, why is it so? Where are these costs coming from? Technology, for example, it's not cheap given the experience that we've had before. The cost of ballot papers, you're talking about 19 million using the current voter register. Each vote is supposed to have 6 ballots to be cast on the election day. It means 120 million ballot papers. Even if you are going to buy the ballot paper at 1 shilling, it means that you're talking already at 120 million Kenyan shillings. And yet the specification of that ballot paper will determine how much you're going to spend on it and the logistics around that. So on one hand, yes, we want to reduce the cost of elections, but on the other hand, we must also agree what are the specific ingredients that will go into running a credible election. And the Commission largely is constrained by the legal framework. They are mandated to do these things to ensure that they have technology in place. And the way the law structures, for example, the number of human resource that you have to put in place, for example, the number of polling officials per polling station. If you look at that again, you find that there is a challenge there. So on one hand, the Commission is faced by that challenge of saying, okay, we want to run these elections in accordance with the law. But on the other hand, there is a demand by the public that the cost of elections goes down. But then how do you go about that? So what the relationship between what Mr. Chebukati said and what Mr. Odinga said, I think what that calls wants us to do is basically calling upon us to be able to look at it transparently and be able to determine in specific terms what are these cost drivers, other than having a public exchange over things that are basically technical. Right. And also, of course,
and the Electoral Management Body, of course, has come under spotlight in every time we talk about a free and fair election. We've seen IEBC now unveil its own reforms days after the BBI report there. And in that report, IEBC wants the number of commissioners reduced to 5 as opposed to the current 7 commissioners, saying this will help increase the Commission's efficiency and effectiveness and, more importantly, reduce potential for factionalism from within. Talk to us about this recommendation, if you've seen this report, and whether there's any water to the recommendations by IEBC.
Well, I mean, I think they're speaking from their own experience. And you know that before, if you look at the history of the Electoral Commission in Kenya, there's a time we even had 22 commissioners running the, during the Kivuitu days, we had 22 commissioners running the election. We've reduced that number to 9 as a standard number for commissioners, but largely informed by historical practices where each commissioner was supposed to represent or purportedly representing the different regions, which were the old provinces. That number was reduced to 7 for whatever reason that the Kiraitu Orengo Committee came up with. They justified the number 7. Now, of course, the Commission saying 5 is largely based on their own experience. And the current state, if you look at it, there are only 3 of them. So the question of quorum comes into play. But I mean, I wouldn't really be concerned about the number at the moment, as long as it doesn't go beyond 9. What I'll be concerned about is the decision-making structure and the type of leadership, that we practice when it comes to making critical decisions. So you might have a proper structure in place, but at the end of the day, if you have individuals who do not really provide that astute leadership that is required, you will still have the same challenges. So,
and in fact, on the same breath, there is a recommendation there to end the fights between the commissioners and the secretariat, to have that the roles of the commissioners be separated from that of the chief executive officer. Of course, you were the the immediate former CEO there. Is that a recommendation that can end the infighting within the commission?
Well, and I think it also goes beyond that. One of the things that people have to always know that perhaps if you look at all public sector CEOs, either running corporations or independent commissions, there's only one position that had terms of reference clearly defined in law, and that was the position of the CEO of IEBC. And that tended to create a more powerful position if you get somebody else somebody who is more aggressive to fill that particular position. And yet, if you compare the terms of reference as set out in law for the office of the CEO and compare that with the terms of reference set out for the chairman of the commission, which is basically to declare the national the result of the presidential election, and 2, to chair the meetings of the commission, you already see that power seems to be resident in the office of the CEO, as chairman does a formal thing, just mere formalism. So yes, clarifying the roles of the chair and the commissioners vis-a-vis the management headed by the CEO, that becomes very critical. And I think it's important that is done so that we minimize this perception of power misallocation. Yeah.
Report also seeks seemingly to want more powers to investigate issues like questionable credentials of those who make it to the ballot, and so they're asking to be mandated with a of self-declaration forms for an election, for law change to provide for grounds to recall members of parliament as well. Also wants laws change to prohibit prospective candidates from vying in electoral areas other than those in which they are registered as voters. All very pertinent issues pertaining to matters election. But let's talk about the timelines that we have really to overhaul the IEBC and to implement either recommendations, either those by the Commission or those by the BBI report. How much time do we have to put this house in order?
We don't have much time, actually. If you look at it, we already 20 months to the next election. If elections have to be held on August 9th, 2022, we're just about 20 months away. And I looked at some of the recommendations. Of course, it will call for really consensus building to ensure that the timelines are actually achieved. Because before that, you're going to have a referendum. And the latest, I think, if you want to have the changes effected through the BBI process, if you want to have those changes effected during the 2022 elections, then you need to have appropriate time given to the commission or the new commission if you're going to have a new commission. And here we are talking about 1 year before the election. We need to have all these changes having taken place. So the last date for me to have a referendum should be mid-2021. Beyond that, then you're looking at a very strict timelines, which could actually, lead to greater shambolic state in terms of election preparedness, to the extent that it might compromise actually our election preparedness for 2022. So we do not have much time now. And by the way, another thing I also read is like the timelines for party nomination. For example, the BBI already proposes that it should be done 6 months before the election. So if you take August 2022, it means the nominations must start happening in February 2022. And now, from February up to now, we are looking at 15 months away. So there's a lot of work to be done in the next few months, which will require consensus to be able to fast-track some of those critical decisions. Mm-hmm. If not, then we are risking having a difficult election come 2022.
All right. That is former IEBC CEO Ezra Chiloba there speaking to us about the task at hand of creating a credible election agency to conduct the next election, possibly a referendum in the country.